Hundreds of thousands of people across Central America have fled their homes because of Ira and Iota storms' chaos. The coronavirus pandemic in the United States continued to advance, with 200,000 new and 406 new cases and 2,239 fatalities. Burkina Faso main political parties rallied this Thursday ahead of the presidential elections this Sunday, November 22nd. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. Hundreds of thousands of people across Central America have fled their homes after hurricanes Iota and Ira wreaked havoc from Tabasco in southern Mexico and Panama this month. As of Monday, there were 55,435 people in 535 shelters across Honduras, government data showed. Workers at 4 international aid organizations and 2 local church leaders informed that inadequate sanitary conditions at shelters in the northern city of San Pedro Sula were at serious concern. Honduran Deputy Health Minister Roberto Consenza said that more than a quarter of 3,500 rapid tests by local authorities in shelters in San Pedro Sula had come back positive. The Bolivian Ombudsperson Office and social organizations are demanding justice for the victims of Sencata and Sacaba massacres perpetrated by the security forces in 2019 following the coup against former President Evo Morales. A little more than a year after the events, which saw human rights violations by security forces and the killing of at least 37 people, the calls for those responsible to face justice who were protected by the de facto regime installed after the coup have intensified. Meanwhile, the Bolivian Senate and the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights are set to launch an investigation against the de facto president, Yanine Áñez, for her role in the massacres. The plenary session of Peru's Constitutional Court ruled by majority this Thursday that the appeal presented by the ousted President Martín Vizcarra, accusing the Congress of overstepping its powers, was unfounded. Speaking exclusively to TeleSUR, Peruvian lawyer and university professor Héctor Bejar pointed out that the ruling leaves Vizcarra without any possibility of returning to power in the country.
Well, this means that any attempt to return former President Vizcarra to the government palace is definitely out of the question, even though this had not exactly been considered in the dispute over jurisdiction by the executive during the term of Mr. Vizcarra. It must be taken into account that this demand was made before the very abrupt presidential changes that have been taking place in Peru.
And the professor at the National University of San Marcos also referred to the possibility of a house arrest order against former Peruvian President Martín Vizcarra.
He also accepted this situation, and the only thing he can do is to appear before the prosecutor's office, because he has 2 trials already presented to the Peruvian authorities. We have to wait and see. But it is likely that within the next few weeks we will have former President Vizcarra under house arrest, at least in Peru.
And the political crisis that Peru has experienced in recent days has entered in a certain calm with the appointment of Francisco Sagasti as the new president. The relatives of the 2 young men killed in the widespread anti-government protests have expressed hope that the new administration will bring change to the country.
The new president, hopefully, because they are new people, they work for the good of our country, and we are no longer in the streets with death and murder. I feel sorry that my son is leaving us, but at the same time I also feel proud that everyone, all of Peru, has learned that Inti and Brian have started what it is, so that this ends up in democracy.
Rescue and reconstruction work continues in Central America after Hurricane Iota's devastating passage through the nation. The flash flooding and landslides sparked by Iota caused at least 41 deaths across the region. Emergency and disaster response personnel, as well as the police and residents affected by the weather phenomenon, have joined in efforts to repair the damages. Central American governments have requested international aid in order to address the widespread destruction caused by both Iota and Era, or Hurricane Ira. The U.S. Agency for International Development announced it was allocating an additional $17 million in life-saving aid to help people affected by both hurricanes in Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua, while UNICEF has issued an appeal for $42.6 million to deliver humanitarian assistance in the region. Meanwhile, the Red Cross announced that on Friday it will begin to transport a field hospital, water treatment plants, and other supplies to Honduras to attend to 50,000 people. The International Regional Organization for Plant and Animal Health has warned that hurricanes Iota and Ira have left Central America exposed to pests that could destroy crops and diseases affecting livestock. The organization forecasts problems affecting banana and pineapple plantations due to saturated soil, which generates fungi and bacteria. The regional body has also highlighted that the temperature and humidity that prevail in the region could increase the incidence of the coffee leaf rust in Honduras and Nicaragua. Meanwhile, several serious animal diseases, including leptospirosis, are significant threats. Iota and Ira have caused damage to the agricultural sector in Nicaragua, Honduras, Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, Costa Rica, and Panama. And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Nicaragua, more than 250 recovery and repair brigades continue to be deployed across the country following the damages caused by Hurricane Iota. Authorities reported that 81 hospital centers suffered damages to their infrastructure, but health personnel continued to work to care for those injured in the events stemming from the harsh weather. The head of the Nicaraguan Institute for Municipal Development, Guiomar Irias, explained that the municipalities most affected by Iota's heavy rains were Mazatepe, Managua, Jinotega, and Mandaime. Iota, which made landfall in Nicaragua as a Category 5 hurricane with maximum sustained winds of 260 km per hour, also badly hit Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador. This Thursday, Uruguay's National Medical Union and the Medical Federation of the Interior began a 24-hour strike to demand for better working conditions. Demonstrators rallied in the front of the Ministry of Social Development in the afternoon to reject the budget adjustments proposed by the government. Health Union spokesperson Federico Preve stressed that in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, government institutions should be strengthening the health system to provide better quality care to the population. He also noted that the quality of health services will continue to fall in line with sector wages. And the coronavirus pandemic in the United States continued to advance with 200,146 new cases and 2,239 fatalities linked to COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. With these numbers, the U.S. has surpassed 12 million cases and reached 258,333 deaths since the beginning of the pandemic. The 2,000 daily death toll was regularly surpassed during the spring, the peak of the U.S. pandemic, but had not been exceeded for months. The epidemic is now in an exponential phase across the country, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, calling on Americans to refrain from travel for the Thanksgiving holiday late next week. The Secretary of the U.S. State of Georgia, Brad Raffensperger, stated that a hand audit of ballots was completed and confirmed Joe Biden as the winner of the November 3rd election in the state. An audit was launched after UN official results show Biden leading President Donald Trump by about 14,000 votes. The audit confirmed that the original machine count accurately portrayed that the Democrat candidate had won the state. Raffensperger is expected to formally certify Biden's victory on Friday. Trump, who has claimed without evidence that there were widespread irregularities and fraud in the states in which he lost to Biden, including Georgia, can still request a recount in Georgia after the results are certified because the margin of victory is less than 0.5%. And as part of the unfounded claims being pushed by the Trump campaign, attorney for the president Sidney Powell blamed Venezuela, Cuba, and China for a non-existent plot using software to flip Trump votes to Biden votes.
Here and uncovering more by the day is the massive influence of communist money through Venezuela, Cuba, and likely China in the interference with our elections here in the United States. The Dominion voting systems, the Smartmatic technology software, and the software that goes in other computerized voting systems here as well, not just Dominion, were created in Venezuela at the direction of Hugo Chavez to make sure he never lost an election after one constitutional referendum came out the way he did not want it to come out. We have one very strong witness who has explained how it all works.
The European Union must only lift coronavirus restrictions slowly and gradually to avoid another wave of infections, the head of the bloc's executive said on Thursday. Ursula von der Leyen spoke after 27 national leaders discussed stepping up joint testing efforts in the bloc, doling out vaccines and coordinating easing lockdowns as a second wave of the pandemic weighs on Europe. Europe has had about 11.3 million confirmed COVID-19 cases and nearly 280,000 people have died. The pandemic has also thrust the EU into its deepest recession. And the migratory crisis is deepening in Spain as thousands of refugees arrive in the Canary Islands. According to data from the national government, more than 16,000 asylum seekers have arrived in the Canary Islands so far this year. The most complex situation is seen in the port of Arguineguín, where at least 2,000 people are living in what they have described as inhumane conditions, without access to basic services or legal advice. Hundreds of those living were forcibly removed from the port by police on Tuesday, exposing apparent tensions between the authorities on the island and the Spanish government in Madrid over how best is to respond to the recent spike in arrivals. In the face of this situation, sectors of the opposition are calling for the resignation of the Interior Minister, while the European Union remains silent. Meanwhile, the International Organization for Migration has warned that over 300 people have died trying to reach the Canary Islands. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Burkina Faso main political parties rallied this Thursday ahead the presidential elections this Sunday, November 22nd. The walls of Burkina Faso's capital are smothered in posters as more than a dozen rivals try to win over voters ahead of Sunday's general election. Burkina Faso President Roch-Marc Christian Kabore is seeking a second term in office. Meanwhile, Eric Omboigo, one of the three favorites in Burkina Faso's presidential election, promises that his CDP party, that of ex-President Blaise Compaoré, will return to power. The government of Jordan has announced it will open a consulate in Western Sahara in an apparent support of Morocco's presence in the region. The decision was announced after a phone call between King Mohammed VI and King Abdullah II. Arab Gulf monarchies have expressed support for Morocco after its army intervened on Friday in a UN-monitored area to open a road that was blocked by Polisario supporters and armed fighters for 3 weeks. Recent conflicts erupted this month in Guerguerat after the Secretary General of the Polisario Front, Bahim Ghali, decreed on November 14 the state of war throughout the Sahara territory by considering the ceasefire signed with Morocco in 1991 as broken. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited on Thursday an Israeli West Bank settlement and the Golan Heights, showing support to Israel's claims to sovereignty over the area that it captured from Syria in the 1967 war and later annexed. The latest visit of Pompeo to the Israeli-occupied West Bank ratifies the support of the U.S. against the Palestinian cause. Also, Syria has condemned Pompeo's visit to occupied Golan Heights. Pompeo's tour across the Middle East has raised the concern of regional governments for the moves the U.S. administration is holding based on its interests before outgoing President Trump leaves office. And the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has announced that the total number of COVID-19 cases in the continent has now surpassed the 2 million mark. Africa represents less than 4% of the world's total cases. However, many experts believe the official numbers fall far short of the reality, as many COVID-19 infections and related fatalities are linked being missed. Africa's testing rates are among the lowest in the world, and generally deaths of all types go unrecorded. The continent has reported a coronavirus death toll of less than 48,000 so far. Countries such as Sudan, Chad and Egypt have registered the highest death rates across the country at 7.8%, 6.2% and 5.8% respectively. South Africa has reported the highest number of cases in the continent at more than 757,000, but is also done at the African nation carrying out the highest number of COVID-19 tests. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees has issued an alert regarding the conflict in Ethiopia, as its mission is being overwhelmed by the dimensions of the situation. The murder of at least 500 civilians in 3 different massacres in the Tigray region has sparked the mass exodus of Ethiopians into neighboring Sudan. At least 36,000 people have crossed the border with just the clothes on their backs. According to the UNHCR records, 4,000 people across the border every day. The ongoing fighting between the Tigray People Liberation Front and the Ethiopian Federal Army is also complicating the delivery of the humanitarian aid, with almost the entire north of the country cut off. The United Nations has warned that the looming humanitarian crisis could be irreversible. Ethiopia's army chief has accused the Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the country's highest-profile Tigrayan abroad, of lobbying in favor of the breakaway region and helping to provide it with weapons.
Now that his members, those who have a similar kind of thinking, what do you expect from him? We don't expect he will side with the Ethiopian people and condemn them. So, he has left no stone unturned to help them. Will he be successful or not? That's another issue. He has worked in neighboring countries to condemn the war. He has worked for them to get weapons.
In Uganda, police have confirmed the death of at least 7 demonstrators during protests in the capital, Kampala. Spokesperson for the Ugandan police, Fred Nganga, explained that up until Wednesday night, 7 people had lost their lives due to violence following clashes with security forces in the midst of protests sparked by the arrest of opposition leader Bobi Wine. The official also confirmed that 45 people were injured in the violence. Wine remained in police custody on Thursday for allegedly violating coronavirus measures at his rallies. Meanwhile, Enanga accused his supporters of using violence as a tool of his election campaign. And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also, if you feel so inclined, join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.